How to become evidence-based physiotherapist. Evidence-based practice is now become a buzzword in physiotherapy and in medicine. Everybody talks about evidence-based. Every treatment is coming up with a prefix attached to it that is evidence-based this, evidence-based that, and so on and so forth. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what it means to become an evidence-based physiotherapist. So if you're interested, rather than looking for an evidence-based treatment, I think we should first invest in ourselves in becoming an evidence-based physiotherapist. So what it takes to become an evidence-based physiotherapist and what actually is evidence-based practice and why it is now valued. This is what I'm going to cover quickly though. So evidence-based practice, most of us would have the typical uh, definition that is given. It's a continuous practice, integration of best available evidence, patient preferences with clinical expertise. But evidence-based practice, in the way I see it, is in its simplest form, it is the doing the best that we can. If that is That's as simple as it. And our patients expects that we are doing the best we can in taking care of them. And it also means doing the right thing in a given circumstances and also making patient-centered decisions. These words cannot get more simple than what it states. I don't know if it requires any kinds of even explanation for it. So that is what evidence-based practice is. So why is it so difficult? Why there is a group of people are opposing? No, it is not possible, or it's not feasible, or whatever other things people are saying. While the thing is, doing the best we can is sometimes not always in the best interest of physiotherapist or the medical practitioner. And that is why this has become a very contentious issue. I don't want to discuss much in detail about it. I guess you should put your mind into understanding why we are not able to do the best we can. It's not that we don't have the best treatment available. In many cases, we really have the best treatment available, except that we are unable to put our thoughts into it and decide and give the best we can. So what is stopping us from doing this? Or more importantly, if you are a physiotherapist who is convinced that as a physio, we must do the best we can and we must do the right thing given the circumstances, and we have to make patient-centered decision. If you're convinced that, you can go ahead and listen to the remaining part of the presentation. Otherwise, I guess you can save your time. Like, as I said, I think I'm going to skip this typical, very well-known definition, because I guess everybody is very well known, very well know about this definition. Before talking about the steps there, I just want to put this across that the idea of evidence-based practice is not something new, as many would like to assume. Just because we hear more often now, it doesn't mean that this idea has come something new. It is as old as Tirukkural, which is written 2000 years ago. If you're familiar with Tirukkural, or if you're from uh, Tamil Nadu, you will know what it means. I've given the English translation for others who are not familiar with it. It only means to discern the truth in everything by whomsoever spoken is wisdom. That is, practice based upon the truth, irrespective of who has said it. Or in other words, not to rely on the person, on a person or an authoritative person or authoritative source, but find out what is the truth, underlying truth in it. That is what Thiruvalluvar has said when it comes to that we shouldn't just rely on people's words or who has spoken it, and what kind of authority they are. This is the fundamental core of evidence-based practice. It requires us to find out the truth, not just believe on based on an authority. I mean, this authority can be a teacher, a popular opinion, or it can be a very well known textbook. It can be anything, but we shouldn't rely on it. We need to find the truth. So it's not something new. And another important thing about evidence-based practice, it is also the Indian Constitution expects its citizen to develop scientific temper, that is, to think critically and integrate scientific evidence into practice. It is identified as one of the duties as citizen of India, right? So again, evidence-based practice was there all along, and the forefathers of our constitution of our country wanted us to develop a scientific temper in whichever field you are. So just that the point that I want to make is it's not something new. It's just we have not realized it for a very long time. Right, now let's get to the actual focus of this talk. It is 5 steps to become evidence-based physiotherapist. There are many steps. Of course, I've identified the most important 5 steps according to me. Okay, if you want to become a evidence-based physiotherapist, the first thing, and also this is what I have done, is that you need to be able to think critically. And being critical means doesn't necessarily have to be being negative. It means to be open to change, right? And also it means that not accept anything at face value. Oh, because this book it is written so, because so and so has said so, that so and so person is a very, he's a great person, he's very well known, famous guy, his name is that, right? Truth or the fact is not determined by these reasons, right? Thinking critically is the way to identify the truth, right? So if you want to become evidence-based physiotherapist, the first step that you need to develop is your ability to ask questions, questions of accepted practices. Is it really true? We are giving, let us say that we are giving electrical stimulation for Bell's palsy for a very long time. Patients are getting better and so on and so forth. All right, we still have to ask the question, is it really true that the electrical stimulation is improving recovery in patients with Bell's palsy? Your ability to ask this question and to even think of this question, is it really true, is the first step to become evidence-based physiotherapist. You might feel a little bit anxious and at times frustrated, questioning everything, but that's a start. That's how. And if you think that you are among you become among a minority, don't worry, because the development in science has so far has happened because people have started questioning. So you will find yourself in minority until you will really come up with an idea that is going to change how a medicine is practiced. I'll give you some examples. Is that the all the advances in medicine are outcome of critical thinking. We did not develop we did not develop in from a medical science point of view by just practicing what is always being done, by just practicing what is traditional, because there's a lot of opposition whenever we say that traditional practice uh, we should uh, we should not discard because this is tradition, right? When it comes to medicine, the traditional practices is something that has to be discarded, because only then a new treatment with a better outcome has is developed. And you will be surprised what are all the traditional, so-called traditional treatment that we have been that as a human race has been receiving medical interventions in the past. I'll just give you some examples. Bloodletting is a practice that it is even popular in 19th century. That is for most of the illness, cutting a vein and getting the bad blood out is part of a treatment. It's a very, very popular treatment. And of course, nobody would like to go through this treatment. If you're feeling sick and get some blood out, right? So this is a traditional treatment, but it is no longer relevant. As is trepanation. This is medieval times a treatment that involves putting a hole in your skull, right? This is also a traditional treatment. So the justification for a treatment should be based upon the value it produces in terms of outcome, not because it is traditional, at the same time, not because it is new, right? If you start thinking critically, these kind of arguments would fall flat, right? So if we got to develop our ability to think critically and ask question, and I think this is an important step in becoming evidence-based physiotherapist. This is just a recent example of such critical thinking which has resulted in development of vaccine for the COVID-19 pandemic that we are currently in. Lots of lives saved. So what is the traditional treatment for COVID-19? Nothing. What is the traditional treatment outcome of what is the outcome of traditional treatment for COVID-19? Death, or few percentage of people, and quite a lot of people have suffered and so on. So if we stick with, because something that is always something what we have done before, we are likely to lose lots of lives, and a lot of people are going to become disabled. So we move forward in medicine by questioning the status quo, not just following the status quo. Next step may be considered controversial, but it's just a fact. We have to stop relying on textbooks as a source of knowledge. It is no longer relevant. That it has to end. Reason why? Not because I have a personal enmity towards textbooks, for the simple fact that textbooks are almost always outdated. So and this is especially true if we are talking about effectiveness of treatment. If you are talking about using textbook as a reference for effectiveness of treatment, it might be useful if you're reading textbooks to read pathology or some basic science. But when it comes to treatment, deciding treatment, textbooks are the worst source. We shouldn't read. And our recent research, which we did as part of a student project, we just evaluated most of the textbooks to see how updated they are. They are very, very bad. In a very, very bad shape. It is very ineffective. Harmful care is being recommended by the textbooks. So if you're a student or you just completed, it might be disappointing for you, but just get over it and stop reading textbooks if you want to practice evidence-based practice. And if you ask, then what should I read? Read good quality systematic reviews. That is where you can find whether you treat which treatment that you should be giving. The third step is to embrace uncertainty in clinical practice. Now, this could be very tricky because we never talk about uncertainty. We always see clinical practice or selecting treatment or patient's recovery in terms of certainty. That is, a treatment is effective, treatment is not effective. If you give this treatment, patient will improve, right? And also, a lot of times this is all it just become a source of debate over evidence-based practice, that if you give evidence-based practice, does it mean all patients will get better, or is still whether evidence-based practice also work in some group of patients who are severe. All these kind of questions is asked because people don't unfortunately, people couldn't understand the uncertainty that is always embedded in a clinical practice. Uh, what I'm trying to say is practicing evidence-based practice or inculcating evidence-based practice doesn't guarantee that you will get a success in every patient, right? And because there is quite a lot of other factors that influences recovery, right? And there is also a limit to to the extent we can help our patients. So sometimes we wouldn't know exactly how the patient will respond, but we will make a best guess, which is based on facts. So it's what we call intellectual guess. So the difference is, so if you ask, so if there is uncertainty, so why evidence-based practice, I would say the difference is crossing the road with eyes open and eyes closed, right? So crossing the road with eyes open is what evidence-based practice is. There are uncertainty. You can't really say how exactly will end up on the other side, but at the same time, you can have a look at what is coming in directions, what's coming on the both directions, and then decide an appropriate step. And not practicing evidence-based practice, there is also uncertainties there, but that uncertainty is just too much, and the risk of getting involved in accident is very high. So this is what I meant. This is what I meant by uncertainty. Even in evidence-based practice, it doesn't take away uncertainty, but it's still a better practice. It just means we're opening the eyes, looking here, both sides, look for the vehicles that is coming onward when crossing the road. The fourth step is think from patient perspective. Now, most of us would like to believe that we are thinking from patient perspective, but unfortunately we are not. It's an intrinsic bias as medical professionals or as physiotherapists we have. That is, we always think from what benefits us, right? How can we, whether a patient has to come for, if evidence suggests that a unsupervised practice itself can work in some a group of patients, but we would rather give much of supervised practice because there are so many conflicts of interest is involved. And also as physiotherapists, sometimes we often, common example is we tend to focus on impairments, quality of movement, weakness, range of motion, all of it, rather than thinking what actually matters to patients, which is their functional activities, right? So we need to learn to think from patient perspective and set goals that are something your patient really wants to achieve, rather than just following a set of predetermined goals: improve short-term goal, improve impairment; long-term goal, improve functional activities, and so on and so forth, right? So this is really an important skill to become an evidence-based practice. You will think what actually would help my patient to get better, what kind of outcomes that they are interested in, and what is in the best interest of my patient, right? When as a physiotherapist, we start putting patients in the center, and that is really an important step for our rehabilitation to work. And finally, you need to learn to use data to support your clinical decisions. This is like most of us have lots of trouble in using data, but I think there can be no excuses, especially in today's world. If you're practicing physiotherapist, we got to understand fundamentals of uh, data and data interpretation. And this doesn't really require complex understanding of statistics, formulas, and so on. Basically, all we need to know is fundamental maths, that is addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, percentage. This is all we need to know about data to be an evidence-based practitioner. So you really don't need a complex understanding of uh, statistics, right? But we should be able to, if a data is given, if it's a 10 plus 10 is equal to 20, is something we do when we deal with money. But when it comes to patients, when we talk about effectiveness, we really don't talk in a quantitative term. The most commonly used word is patient, the treatment is effective. Now, what a word effective means? How much? 10% improvement, 20% improvement, 1% improvement, all of it is effective, right? So this kind of simple logic, numerical logic, which we are very familiar, but except that we had to learn to apply in our clinical decisions. So we need to make some effort, and you must be willing to make an effort if you want to become evidence-based physiotherapist. So that's all I have for what I want to say about what I think is needed to become evidence-based physiotherapist. And feel free to share your comments, and if you have any suggestions, let me know. And also subscribe to our channel, NPT update, so that we can come up with more and more such videos. Thank you very much for watching.